Except you had a problem trying to interview Mike Pence. What happened?
I did. I mean, this is a 2-year process. As you know, books take a long time. And I tried with Vice President Pence again and again, but I was told that, there isn't much in it for us. I got very far down the line. But I was told that for them, if a book makes him look like he's doing a lot and is very involved, President Trump will not be happy. Because it makes him look less powerful. And if it looks like he's not doing very much, that doesn't help his political aspirations in 2024, which they are clearly planning for. So he's surrounded by a very smart group of people. Nick Ayers, his chief of staff, who I did interview in his West Wing office. Nick, is somebody he's 35 years old. He ran the Republican Governors Association, and he's very protective of Mike Pence. And they don't agree to work with authors. And perhaps from their perspective, that's smart because of the president he's serving, who's reading and watching TV constantly.
Yeah, that does seem to be a no-win situation for Mike Pence. But what did Vice President Joe Biden tell you about Mike Pence?
Well, I think it's really interesting that Vice President Biden and former Vice President Biden and Vice President Pence speak about once a month.
That is interesting.
Yeah, and really unprecedented. I mean, Biden and Cheney weren't talking once a month.
What do these two talk about?
Foreign policy. And so when Biden goes on a trip, or when the King of Jordan came here to visit President Trump and he flew out to Delaware to talk to former Vice President Biden, he is calling the White House with readouts of these meetings. And it's kind of a back channel, and because he sees Mike Pence as a sort of someone you can work with. And foreign leaders are nervous about President Trump. They don't know what to expect. And so Biden told me that he kind of offers them advice.
And is Mike Pence receptive to Joe Biden's advice?
Biden said he is. He's compared it to Bill Clinton talking to Newt Gingrich. They disagree about everything politically, but they can speak civilly. And Biden said, President Trump doesn't have the bandwidth or the experience on foreign policy. And Mike Pence is a politician. He gets it more than President Trump does.
Well, Kate Anderson Brower, the book again is First in Line, out today. Yes. So fascinating read on all of these vice presidents and what their role is. Thanks so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
And thanks to our international viewers for watching. For you, CNN Talk is next. For our U.S. viewers, New Day continues right now.
I'm proud of our Eagles, and I'm proud that they're not going.
And it's being used by some to wage a political protest. The president doesn't have to be complicit.
Get that son of a off the field right now.
To Donald Trump, they're sons of bitches. This is an imperial presidency.
If I were president of the United States and I had a lawyer that told me I could pardon myself, I think I'd hire a new lawyer.
The pardon power is complete, and there is no limitation on it.
The framers of the Constitution did not want a king.
The special counsel's office accusing Paul Manafort of witness tampering.
Will he plead, facing now clear jail time?
If it's witness tampering, there's a huge cover-up underway by Manafort.
This is New Day with Allison Camerata and John Berman.
And good morning, everyone. Good morning, John.
Good morning to you.
This is your new day.
It is.
Yeah, though some of it may seem like deja vu. President Trump canceling the White House visit for the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, citing the team's stance on national anthem protests, even though none of them did protest by taking a knee last season. The real issue appears to be player turnout. Fewer than a dozen players plan to attend today's event. Philadelphia's mayor slams the president as, quote, a fragile egomaniac. This comes as a new development in the special counsel investigation. Special counsel Robert Mueller is accusing Paul Manafort, the former Trump campaign chairman, of witness tampering in his federal tax and money laundering case.
Rudy Giuliani tells CNN the president's legal team and press secretary, they made mistakes denying the president was involved in that misleading statement about the Trump Tower meeting with the Russians. Giuliani insists it was a mistake, not a lie, though they sure made that mistake again and again and again over a whole lot of time. And White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders refuses to explain her role in spreading that lie. Let's begin our coverage with CNN's Caitlin Collins live this morning at the White House. Caitlin.
John, I think Allison put it best saying it was deja vu, because here the president has opened a new chapter into his culture war with the NFL by uninviting the Philadelphia Eagles just 24 hours before they were to show up here at the White House for that Super Bowl celebration. Now, it became quite clear why it was canceled, and that's because not many of the Eagles were going to show up, and you can imagine what the optics would look like with President Trump and 8 or 9 football players standing around him would be. So they have said that they are unable to come, saying that they don't agree with the president. But if you scratch the surface, you can see this clearly goes back to that national anthem issue and those players who knelt during the national anthem last football season protesting police brutality. Now, the president clearly irked by this, making it quite obvious on Twitter last night, saying that they were uninvited and then saying that only a small number were going to come and that staying in the locker room for the playing of the national anthem is also not acceptable. Now, back in last season, none of the Eagles knelt nor stayed back in the locker room during the national anthem, but that is that new NFL rule that if you're not going to stand for the national anthem, you must stay back in the locker room or risk being fined. Clearly something that has bothered the president. But Philadelphia is also not happy. Their mayor issuing a blistering statement of President Trump last night, saying that uninviting the Eagles just goes to show that the president is, quote, not a true patriot, but a fragile egomaniac obsessed with crowd size and afraid of the embarrassment of throwing a party which no one wants to attend. Now, of course, these are not typically political events, but ever since the president has stoked this war with the NFL since last September, when he referred to players who kneel on the field as SOBs, this is something we are seeing continue here. But it is escalating far more than we ever imagined. John and Allison.
All right, Caitlin Collins at the White House, thanks so much. Joining us now, CNN political analyst John Avlon and national reporter for the Washington Post, Wes Lowry. Wes, you're part of the lead piece of the Washington Post about how this all unfolded over the last 24 hours. What was going on behind the scenes at the White House? This really feels like the crowd size was a major driving issue.
Certainly, it was, as the Philadelphia mayor notes in his statement, at least in part, the factor, the idea that these players would stand up Trump and that he would look bad on camera certainly seems to have played a factor here. You know, the piece today with my colleague Josh Dawsey includes a lot of details behind the scenes of why the president has stoked this war and this fight. Really does trace back to that rally in Alabama last year when he calls the kneeling NFL players SOBs. He says, you know, someone should tell them you're fired. And the president was, to some extent, taken aback by how well received those comments were, and that was one of the moments where he decided this was a winning political issue that he was going to continue to stoke. And so what we've seen time and time again is that at every juncture, he sought to throw more fuel on this fire, going as far, we report in the piece today, as inquiring about whether or not the NFL could somehow be harmed via the GOP tax bill last year, right? Trying to figure out how to continue this fight because he sees it as a winning one politically.
But I don't know how you can see it as winning, John, when if you're being stood up by the winners, if the winners of the Super Bowl are standing you up, I mean, at some point, doesn't that start to have diminishing returns for the president, this going after them and saying vulgar comments about the players and everything?
Well, the president's got three basic strategies that he employs at almost everything: distract, deflect, discredit. And so he's frustrated that he's going to look bad because the Super Bowl winners don't want to come to his party.
And I think wouldn't that have been true? I mean, if there were 70 who originally applied for a background check and then it had dwindled down to 10, wouldn't that have been embarrassing for the president?
Yeah, I mean, I potentially, but again, not everything is politics, and we keep infusing politics into our sports, and the president thinks this is a winning issue. This is simply playing the culture war card. Let's not overthink it. But he thinks it's a winning issue, not just because the crowds like it, because his base likes it. But it really does diminish, you know, America's greatest game, the Super Bowl, the victory of it, and it makes the president look small. I mean, when the mayor of Philadelphia is calling you a fragile egomaniac, you know, that's not a good look for the president, no matter how you...
What were your 3 Ds right there?
Distract, deflect, discredit.
All right, let me add a fourth. Divide.
Sure.
Right? I mean, divide here, Wes. I mean, this is clearly an issue that divides the country, and the president, he does everything he can to sort of drive that wedge in even further. And it's hard to imagine this issue playing at all, you know, if race were not a factor. I mean, Tom Brady didn't go to the White House last year. You know, when the Patriots won, and one big difference between Tom Brady and some of the Eagles players is, you know, Tom Brady's white.
Is he?
I saw that.
Wow.
Heard that.
Believe it or not. No, well, real quick, you know, I can't let John get away with calling the Super Bowl America's greatest game while my Cleveland Cavaliers are in the NBA Finals, and so I got to correct that. But
just a single game, that's all.
However, I do think that, I mean, the race is clearly the undertone of race is relevant here. Now, it is fair to say, we actually reported in this piece today as well, Trump was really frustrated with the idea that Tom Brady didn't show up at the White House last year, but he didn't talk about it publicly. He didn't cancel the meeting the way that he has here. And this issue around kneeling for the anthem, remember, started by Colin Kaepernick, the former 49ers quarterback, specifically to draw attention to issues of police brutality and police killings of unarmed black people, that race has always been present in this conversation. conversation, both in terms of the initial protest, which Trump has opposed and which his base does not like, as well as in the response to it, right? This idea that black athletes have very often tried to use their platforms to draw attention to historic injustices, and that very often have been told to kind of shut up and sit down and stick to sports. And so we can't pretend that race isn't a factor here. But as you note, there were players, these meetings have not always been political. There have always been players who've come to the White House, and always some players who decided not to. Not every player showed up to see Barack Obama at the White House.
Tim Thomas of the Boston Bruins didn't show up, and he did so as a political statement. He flat out said he was not going to go because of the president's policies.
Of course.
Okay, we should let everybody know that the Philadelphia mayor is coming on our program in the next hour, so stay tuned for that if you want to hear how he's feeling about all of this morning. Meanwhile, let's move on to Rudy Giuliani, the president's attorney. He was on with Chris Cuomo last night, and basically we keep hearing different things about this false statement about whether or not the president was behind the statement from Air Force One about the Russians meeting in Trump Tower. Surprise, it turns out the president dictated that statement, which many people had suspected, but they never confirmed until they confirmed it in a letter. And then the truth came out, and that was embarrassing for Sarah Sanders. And Giuliani last night was basically trying to explain that they just made a mistake, John. So let's play a portion of that.
Why do you think they chose to lie about his role in drafting this statement about Trump Jr.'s meeting with the Russians?
Chris, you think maybe somebody could have made a mistake?
Right. It's a lot of mistakes.
Why is it always
a lot of mistakes?
Why is it always that somebody? You think Jay Sekulow lied? Maybe he just got it wrong. Like I got a few things wrong at the beginning of the investigation. Meaning my knowledge of this is a complex investigation. First week or so, I got a few things wrong, and then it was clarified in a letter, and that's the final position. Well, that's the danger of going under oath. That you can make a mistake. Well, please let me finish.
Please go ahead.
You can make a mistake. You can make a mistake, and then if you want to, you can say it's a lie. But it was a mistake. I swear to God, it was a mistake. The guy made a mistake.
I mean,
this is the Three's Company defense. It's all a big misunderstanding, people. But it's not credible because of the fact pattern. It's Jay Sekulow not once but multiple times saying he did not dictate it. It's Sarah Huckabee Sanders from the White House podium saying multiple times he did not dictate, then being flatly contradicted by their own letter after the fact. There's not a credibility gap with this team. This is a credibility chasm, and it's of their own making. So unfortunately, the assumption of goodwill is tough to extend in the face of the fact.
I have to say, the most telling part of that question and answer was the laugh from Rudy Giuliani. He was laughing at the truth. It was scoffing at the notion of reality there. Look, I know you're close to him there, but it seems to be a complete intentional disregard for reality there. The fact is that they spread a lie. They spread a lie. Now, did Jay Sekulow know he was spreading a lie? I don't know. Did Sarah Sanders know she was spreading a lie?
But either way, that's not a mistake.
But someone knew.
Misleading.
Someone knew.
Misled.
The president knew they were spreading a lie. Hope Hicks, who had the letter dictated her, knew that they were spreading a lie, and Hope Hicks was communications director.
And whoever was on Air Force One at that time. And then you've got the issue of Donald Trump Jr. and the statement he gave to Congress. So, I mean, this is, you can get into the, splitting hairs about lie and intent, but this is clearly they spread a lie from the White House podium and the president's lawyer. And that's why you can't simply assume it's a mistake or accept the Three's Company defense.
Right. And then, Wes, where does that leave us with Sarah Sanders? How can the press and the public believe today, when there's another press briefing or whenever the next one is, anything?
Here. This is a White House and formerly a campaign that often has operated outside of the realms of normal political honesty or willingness to engage with facts this way. But when you have the spokesperson for the White House, and it's not just Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the former spokesperson Sean Spicer dealt with this as well, step to the podium and say things that are later proven to be clearly, demonstrably untrue. It undermines the credibility of the White House in the eyes, unquestionably, of the press, but also in the American people, right? And I think it's really interesting is we see the legal case continuing to play out. One thing that I can't think we should not lose sight of is how remarkable it is that lawyers for the president are so frequently talking in public anyway about these ongoing investigations. And very few people would legally advise the lawyer of a president who is facing an obstruction of justice investigation and potentially a collusion investigation to be, talking to all of our friends and colleagues on air constantly. Perhaps it's a political strategy, but it is still pretty remarkable as a legal strategy, if only because it constantly creates these clashes between what the White House is saying and what the lawyers for the president are saying.
Look, I think it's also not impossible to tie all of this together. The president's bringing up the NFL and doing this thing because it does distract one of your D words from this mess of lies that they got into here. And perhaps the president knew that the Paul Manafort news was going to come out overnight as well. He, out of nowhere, tweeted about Paul Manafort over the weekend. Paul Manafort, the special counsel says, engaged in witness tampering, sending encrypted messages through people to try to get them to shape some of their testimony.
This February, right? I mean, Manafort's already, you know, the degree of heat on Paul Manafort is extraordinary, and he's still trying to witness tamper and influence testimony via WhatsApp and third parties, and the individuals who receive it immediately go to Mueller and say, hey, we got a problem here. This is just a reminder that this is a deep investigation, but this is not necessarily the sharpest knives in the drawer. This is incredibly dumb on Paul Manafort's part. He somehow thought using WhatsApp would not get back to him. This is a bad decision, people.
I got to change my WhatsApp use, I have to say. I also thought that WhatsApp wouldn't come back to haunt him, or me.
John
Avalon, Wes Lowery, great to have you here. Thanks so much, gentlemen.